Good evening, everyone. We are um, happy to have you all here today for our the first meeting in our virtual meeting series, where we begin with the topic commercial and small business. All right, and as you all enter, I ask that you please put your name and neighborhood in the chat so we can know where our residents are viewing from. Again, as you enter, please put your name and neighborhood in the chat so that we know where you are viewing from this evening. My name is Joseph Kemp, by the way. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for the Joe Louis Greenway Neighborhood Planning Study. And so I want to thank you all for being here again with us for our the first meeting in our virtual series. And as you enter, please go ahead and drop your name and neighborhood in the chat. All right, and so this evening's agenda, we'll be talking about the neighborhood planning study, what we heard from community. We'll also be talking about what we found through the data analysis. And then we'll go over our draft strategies and ideas. We'll also have time for questions and breakout discussions. And finally, we'll end on the next steps. Throughout the presentation, you can always drop into the comments and drop a question or comment or concern, and we'll work to answer those when the time comes. So the Greenway itself is a recreational pathway that will traverse the city, crossing multiple neighborhoods, unifying communities and green spaces. We want to be intentional about creating equitable spaces through arts, programming, and economic opportunities for all Detroiters. And this is the planning department team that's leading the neighborhood planning study process. Really, what we do is provide a platform to for cross-departmental collaboration, and then also provide process not only to solicit and document community input on community challenges and opportunities, but we also organize city resources and guide policy to support a resident-led vision. And so also I want to take this moment to recognize people that have been working on this diligently to bring the Greenway project into reality. The Greenway team from the General Services Department who have been managing the planning, design, and construction of the Greenway include some faces that are likely familiar to you. A lot of them are always out in the community, especially our Christina. But also focusing on the present and future of the Greenway. The Joe Louis Greenway Partnership is a nonprofit formed to ensure that the JOG is a space that benefits Detroit neighborhoods in an equitable way. With Executive Director Liana Metley at the helm, the organization is focused on future programming of the Greenway and community engagement that will lead to further community development. Liana Metley is the Executive Director, and she'll be on the call tonight to talk a little bit more about their role. And so to support us in this planning study effort, we've brought on a consultant team that brings a variety of experience locally in Detroit and also as major Greenway projects around in other cities around the United States to help us understand the potential impacts that the Joe Louis Greenway project and opportunities to guide outcomes to serve the community. The neighborhood planning process builds off of the model of the original framework, which incorporated a Citizens Advisory Council. We developed our own version of this called the Community Leadership Team. These individuals are residents of the neighborhoods around the Greenway that are tapped into their community social networks, but also have been a tremendous help with community engagement and reviewing draft materials. Through them, we're able to examine more place-based strategies, engage if we're moving in the right direction. As I mentioned before, the Joe Louis Greenway Framework Plan released in 2021 laid the foundation for the work that we're doing today. The major goals from that plan are to enhance the quality of life and promote community development, and also promote equity, and also improve the transportation system within the city. While the original framework focused on those goals for the Greenway itself, the neighborhood planning study is all about making sure investments in the Greenway benefit the neighboring communities. We're developing strategies through analysis and community engagement affecting these emerging topics listed here. So community, creating jobs and sustaining business, organizational capacity within community, housing affordability, neighborhood improvements, building wealth, and connectivity and mobility. And as we're doing analysis on our city, we are also looking to other cities for guidance as well. We know that looking at other major Greenway projects across the city that they can have incredible impact to the neighboring communities. We don't know how the JLG will affect the neighborhoods it touches yet, but we want to understand, and we also understand that there may be fears of familiar spaces gentrifying as a result of investment of this scale. And still, that concern can exist even at the same time that there's aspiration to see change in your neighborhood. And still, even the Greenway investment, still with the Greenway investment, there are real challenges to achieving the impacts identified in the framework plan. This planning study is an opportunity to better evaluate and plan for the potential economic impacts with community. And so what you see here is an overview of our overall timeline for engagement. We started engagement last year in the spring with meetings in each one of our planning areas. We then had our community leadership team host small group meetings to talk about initiatives and plans that came out of that are important priorities in our community. We also hosted walk and talks where we did neighborhood walks with community members to talk about some of these things, which leads us to our virtual meeting series, which we are at now. And we will complete over the next 2 weeks topic-based discussions about the analysis and the community engagement that we've conducted this past year. And we'll also be back in the communities in April, throughout April and May, to talk about the feedback that we heard in those draft action plans. And then in the summer, we'll come back with a fully formed plan that is reflective of the community's needs and priorities. And so today, most importantly, is about gathering feedback from you all about the draft strategies on these main questions. Are the draft strategies heading in the right direction? Is there an idea that excites you? Are there potential strategies missing that you would like to see? So please keep these questions in mind as the presentation is going forth. And as I said, if you have any questions along the way, you can put them in the chat and we'll be able to answer them before we go into the breakout sessions. Okay. And I'll hand it over to Ashley from Interface to talk about the key questions that we'll be examining for our topic today.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really happy to see this turnout and for you guys to give your input tonight. And thank you, Joseph, for that introduction. I do want to thank all of you who have participated in this process to date. As Joseph said, we're about a year in now, so we've done 2 full rounds of engagement. This is really our 3rd touch point. Tonight, we're here to talk about small businesses and commercial activity along the JLG. As Joseph mentioned, there are 4 other meetings within the next 2 weeks to cover other topic areas. But tonight, we're really focused on the small business and entrepreneurial space and how it relates to the JLG. And so that really brings us to our main two questions for tonight, which is number one, how do we connect trail users to small businesses close to the Greenway? Or if I reframe that, how can we make sure existing businesses are able to benefit from this really great infrastructure and all of the foot traffic that's going along with it that can bring? And then secondly, we really want to think about how do we create opportunities for small businesses and entrepreneurs to really formally set up shop alongside the Greenway. So what could that look like? What is the right process? All of those different questions we need to think about here. Let's go to the next slide. I did want to just touch on a little bit of our analysis that helped to shape how we're answering those questions and really what's informing the draft ideas we're presenting tonight. I'm going to be touching on some of what we heard throughout that great engagement process. But first, I just wanted to present a little bit of the mapping that we've done. Just looking at the map itself, the Greenway, which is this green line, is 27 miles long. And along that route, the Greenway is going to intersect with 23 different commercial streets. And there are also in some cases where the Greenway is on street on specific commercial corridors. And so we really need to think about how to leverage those connections, both when they intersect with commercial corridors, but then also what really happens when you're on a commercial corridor on the Greenway. You'll also see two other data points on this map that are pretty important. The first being population density. So that is the blue shading here. Basically, the light blue is lower population density and the darker blue is higher population density. So more people living in that particular geography. And one of the key things to think about in terms of a thriving commercial corridor and what can make a commercial corridor thrive is making sure that you have enough people or density around it to support it. And so we really need to think about, where are all of these things intersecting? And in this case, where is the darker blue intersecting with where the commercial corridors and the Greenway are overlapping? The second piece we need to look at in this map are where the bright red lines are. And those are Strategic Neighborhood Fund streetscape projects. So I know there's a lot of jargon around the city of Detroit, but that's the short of that is what the city calls SNF corridors. And it's really where the city has been investing in streetscapes and commercial corridors, more specifically in the infrastructure there. I don't know if many of you have seen all of the work that's gone up on the north end of Livernois. It's in this top, oh, you're not looking at my mouse. The very top of Livernois in the top corner, there you go, up there. And the Avenue of Fashion, there's been a lot of great work that's done up there with new trees and new bike lanes and all of those things. So those other red areas are where there's also been focused investment. And we really want to think about where the city's currently investing in those areas where there's a little bit more density and population and where they're already pumping money into those commercial corridors. And we don't want to draw away from that. So one of the considerations that we're thinking about here is how do we support those investments that the city is making? And how do we get people from the Greenway to go and visit those corridors where they're really trying to amp up the amount of vibrancy and commercial activity there? We can go to the next slide. And apologies, I know this chart is a little bit of a doozy, but there's a lot of fun data to share about the Greenway. This chart is really thinking about the kinds of businesses that are near the JLG. So within the half mile of the JLG in each of our planning areas, there's different business mixes to consider. And those will help to tell us, one, what kinds of resources those businesses might need, or what kind of character those commercial corridors might have. And I don't know that it's a surprise to many of you, but the dark red here is really identifying that in many of the commercial corridors or commercial areas around the Greenway, there's a lot of auto-oriented businesses. So that means car repair, car sales, car service, a lot to do with the Motor City, of course. So we really need to be thinking about if those particular businesses are detracting from the experience of the Greenway or inhibiting some of these commercial corridors to be as vibrant as we would like them to be. We also can really use this information to tell us which planning areas have more businesses to connect to and which have less. So in this case, the very top line here is the Southwest, which is the most amount of businesses near the Joe Louis Greenway. And then going down the DeKindercut extension would have the least amount of commercial businesses that might need some supports. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to toss this to Maria. We didn't want to have this to be a half an hour of us talking to you all in a row, so we just wanted to break it up a bit. So I don't know, Maria, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, sure. And on that note, about talking about businesses in the different planning areas and close or adjacent to the Joe Louis Greenway, we wanted to ask you all, what is your favorite business along the JLG route? And if you can drop in your favorite businesses in the Zoom chat, we'll be reading them out loud. And just give everyone a little bit of time.
Joseph's right. We need like Jeopardy music during these ones.
Any businesses that come to mind?
It's okay. We have a quiet bunch tonight.
Yeah. Oh, Michelle is asking if we can show the map again. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know if you can pull up slide 17 again. So the intersections, I can just go through them real briefly. The JLG is going to intersect starting in the southwest with Verner Highway, Michigan, Warren, Tyreman, Joy, Chicago, Grand River, Livernois. Dexter kind of dead ends, but it's pretty close. Of course, Woodward and Highland Park. It goes along McNichols, and then Conant, Warren, Mack, and Verner again. Of course, there's other smaller corridors that intersect along the way, but those are the major ones.
Leah mentioned Equity Alliance. Great, thank you.
Great shout out. We had our Vacant Land Summit there this summer. It's a really great facility. All right, well, while you're thinking about that, let's jump into the next slide. And as also part of this work, so part of it is understanding the geography of where the Greenway intersects with those commercial corridors. And then also trying to understand what kinds of businesses are around the Greenway and what types of businesses there are. This third piece that kind of goes into the strategy making is really thinking about the commercial market analysis. And so we had a market analyst on our team to really help us think through the market. And this is really an overall summary illustrating what his findings were. It's very much simplified here. Oh, keep going. Stay there. This one's long. I want to stress here that we've really simplified it, but every area along the Greenway is different and has its own different considerations. We're really just trying to get a sense of what the overall dynamics are in the retail market. And this really depends on a lot of different factors, things like population density that I mentioned before. Household incomes can really relate to what kinds of retail are viable in some of these areas, what the existing business mix is, even housing sale prices, all of those different factors really help us understand what these areas are and what could potentially support new retail or office development. So here, the darker green indicates a commercial market that is stronger, and the yellows indicate a weaker market. And we use the seed, grow, harvest analogy just to simplify this a bit. Overall, the key takeaway here is that the demand for new retail and office is generally pretty low. And I'm just talking about new development here. We're going to get into supports for existing businesses in a bit, but we just really wanted to understand, what's possible. We did hear from residents that they'd like to see some new retail development, and we want to understand from a market perspective where that might be possible. So here for the grow markets, the opportunity is really to support existing businesses and not focusing on new ones. There's opportunities for for micro retail pop-ups and those kinds of things, really supporting existing businesses. And in the harvest markets, where those might be the areas where we could support some new retail development. So places around Eastern Market, inching up into the Dekinder Cut extension. the darker green area might have stronger market support. And in those lighter green areas, we need to get really creative about what's possible there and what we're looking towards in the long term. Well, let's go to the next slide. I just wanted to dive into those higher level findings a little bit more. We did hear throughout the process that residents really did want to see revitalization of commercial corridors. I've been doing work in Detroit for the last 15 years. I don't think that's a new assessment, and we definitely understand that. But there are several factors that really go into what makes new retail viable. One is housing density, which I've mentioned before, that you do need housing density to support commercial activity. Second, it's really hard to open new retail business these days. So if you think about the rise of online shopping, higher construction costs, some of the cooling of the market post-COVID, also inflation has to deal with some of those dynamics. Things are really not the same in every neighborhood, but it's really important just to recognize that there's no one-size-fits-all approach here. We just need to really understand what's going on in those spaces. We also do need to recognize that in some instances, commercial corridors can have negative perceptions to overcome, and we need to think about what those might be and how we can make those corridors overcome those perceptions. Let's go to the next slide. It's not all bad news. We know that the market is a little bit, weaker in a lot of these areas, but there is some good news. That although the commercial market is cooler than it used to be, the JLG can really be a catalyst for small business. It will bring more foot traffic, and it will create some opportunities for entrepreneurs to set up shop alongside the Greenway. And our market analyst also looked at, the overall job growth in the city, and what he's conveyed to us is that there will be job growth over the next 5 years, which we can help to connect those jobs and those residents along the corridor to them. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to transition now to what all of that information tells us. Those kind of 3 buckets of information and things that the community told us they wanted to see. By first establishing, what are our goals? These goals are building off of the goals from the neighborhood framework plan that Joseph referenced before. And then we're going to walk through some of the ideas to achieve the goals. So first, our goals are to 1, empower entrepreneurs, 2, to support existing local businesses, and then also to connect residents to jobs. If you go to the next slide, the strategies to achieve those goals. I'm going to walk through these in more detail, but let's go to this slide before this. Thank you. First is to, when I mentioned all of those auto-oriented businesses before and improving perceptions of corridors, one of the biggest tools in our toolbox, or in the city's toolbox, is to think about the Blight to Beauty initiatives and where commercial corridors might intersect the JLG. So how do we leverage those initiatives to really support for businesses and properties to make sure they're in compliance and really plan for the future and overcome some of those perceptions? We also want to make sure we're strategically investing and better connecting to commercial corridors that are within walking and biking distance of the JLG. So the existing businesses that are, not necessarily immediately on the Greenway, but very much nearby. How do people feel walking there? Do they know that there's a great thriving business just a block or 2 away? How do we make sure that there's traffic between those 2 assets? We also want to make sure we're creating programs to support retail activity along the JLG, and really thinking about replicable models for setting up some non-traditional retail spaces. So a little bit before I talked about, getting, brick and mortar retail off the ground is a little bit harder in today's market, but there are opportunities to explore non-traditional spaces and what does that look like along the Greenway and how do we make those things happen? And lastly, we want to really be thinking about the long term and creating spaces for entrepreneurs along the Greenway and what that might look like. So let's go to the next slide. And this one is not really geographically based. It's really kind of Greenway wide, we'll say. But the first strategy is really helping with that perception piece to target the city's Blight to Beauty on commercial corridors near the JLG. So this can help create tactical and immediate improvements like targeted demolitions, tree planting, murals, neighborhood stabilization, also to help increase safety. Physically, does it feel safe to walk across the Greenway in terms of traffic safety and crosswalks and all of those things? There might be opportunities to help with those feelings of personal safety in Project Greenlight and implementing different city programs. So, above all, we think that there are opportunities to really think about leveraging this program that the city has along commercial corridors throughout the JLG. We go to the next slide. All of the other ideas I'm going to present tonight, we have example areas to zoom in on. Just 4 example areas for ideas or strategies along the Greenway. Like I said before, 27 miles is a lot. And so we're really trying to pare it down to see, what are our big ideas and how do we test them locally? How do they fall in the Greenway? And tonight we just want to talk through some of these examples. I also wanted to make sure you all understand that these are just example areas that throughout this next few months, we're going to be looking at other intersections along the Greenway and other commercial corridors and how these might apply. So these are really just test cases for us to zoom in and actually start thinking about places and how that might look or feel. So let's go to the next slide. And we kind of chose them based on some initial ideas floated by community, but then also making sure we're kind of covering geographically different kinds of markets along the Greenway. The first one is in the Southwest, right at Werner Highway. So this kind of area in blue here. Here's where the JLG will kind of go through Patton Park and then spit you out on Woodmere. And it really does intersect right with Werner Highway. So there's a real opportunity to think about how the JLG might drive traffic to businesses on Werner Highway that are a few blocks away, but then also how Werner Highway might drive traffic to the JLG. So it's like that two-way street. And what are the things we need to think about there? Let's go to the next slide. So this is zooming in, looking at that particular intersection. We're really thinking about strengthening connections to existing commercial corridors. Here you can see that the commercial activity leading up to the JLG does die off a bit. There are a few vacant properties and gas stations that kind of detract from the pedestrian experience as you're walking to and from these places. So it's a long-term recommendation to really think about, that gap in activity. And as part of the planning study, how do we think about getting those spaces reactivated? And then on the next slide, we also want to be thinking about what that physical connection feels like. Let's jump to the next one. It's a little off center, but the picture in the corner is kind of what the existing condition is right now. You can see that the crosswalks are a little bit degraded. There is that vacant building right on the northeast corner. All of those different things might make it not feel as inviting to walk to the businesses or to bike to the businesses on Werner Highway. So we really want to be thinking about, if we're thinking about the kit of parts of what needs to happen in some of these places where the commercial corridors are intersecting with the Greenway, making sure that the bike lanes are striped and they feel safe to bike on, making sure the crosswalks are very clear, having some wayfinding signage, definitely both ways. So maybe there's opportunities to, once you get to this place on the Greenway, to be pointing to, commercial corridors or businesses, go that way, 5-minute walk for a burger kind of a thing, or I guess in this case, a taco. And then we're also really thinking about, what does the environment feel like? So are there additional greening and street trees that we can add in these types of places to make it feel more comfortable to walk around? And then again, like what, are there mural opportunities or vacant buildings that we want to start addressing? So again, how do we make this, these connections to these really important neighborhood commercial corridors safe and inviting and more vibrant? Let's jump to the next slide. Here, this is kind of in the same vein, but a little bit different of a conversation. So now we've jumped all the way to the northeast, and we're looking at the intersection of McNichols and Joseph Campbell. And in this particular case, you see it kind of outlined on the right side of this map, but the Greenway is going up and down Joseph Campbell, And then just a few blocks away, Conant is one of those SNF streetscape corridors. And so here we have the opportunity to think about, well, there's a lot of investment going into Conant and a lot of community engagement that went around and into that investment. So how do we best connect from our existing commercial corridor to that, all of those great things happening in Conant, and how do we not detract from any of them or draw away from that activity? Let's go to the next slide. So just zooming in here, you can see I've highlighted the Greenway in green and Conant in red. And this, we actually did one of those walk and talks that Joseph talked about before to help us identify what are the best community connections. So that was identified as Lawley and Halleck. Those two, if we're thinking about going back and forth and what are the best ways, those were identified by community as the ways to get there. And what are the improvements we can do to make it feel safe to bike or walk along those corridors. But then also in the long term, what does Joseph Campbell look like itself? And so right now, the Greenway was installed, I don't know, I guess maybe 2 years ago or so. I might be wrong on that. Maybe City can highlight that in the chat. But not too long ago, the Joseph Campbell Greenway was installed. It is on street, and it does kind of lack in a little bit of greening or maybe some of those perception issues. So here the long-term play would really be thinking about, one, making sure we're connecting to Conant, of course, but then also there might be some planting or greenery or other kinds of things along this section of the Greenway to really help to make the Greenway itself feel more comfortable and then seed that kind of longer term investment in this commercial corridor. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now we're going all the way back across the city to the west side. And here, there's an interesting opportunity in the west side. We're really focusing in on Joy Road for a couple of reasons that I'm going to talk about in a bit, but it is a really interesting place. Let's just go to the next slide so I can talk through why we're zooming into this one. So right now, the Joe Louis Greenway, I'm not sure if any of you have been out quite yet, but it's open. It is still a little bit under construction, but built, and you can go and stand on it, and it's a really great experience. But just at this intersection at Joy Road, we basically have 4 properties. One of them is occupied. The northeast corner is an industrial site, American Auto Recycling. We're calling that, it's not necessarily adding to a vibrant commercial corridor, but it is an industrial property that has some auto scrap and those kinds of things. And we're thinking about, one, like how can we improve the look and feel of that property? And then the other 3 corners are vacant. The one across is a vacant building opportunity that we're looking into some potential reuse options or ways to get that activated. But on the south side, there are 2 different community partners who are interested in activating those spaces. And we thought it would be really great to kind of jump in there and explore what that might mean. On the green slide that's highlighted here, those were land bank owned properties that were transferred to Pine Lawn LLC. And they're really interested in doing a really creative commercial pop-up here. And then on the other side in that red area, the Joe Louis Greenway Partnership is really thinking about how they might be able to activate that other city-owned lot on the other side. So here at Joy Road, we have a little bit of a pocket of commercial inactivity where we get to zoom in and really think about how commercial pop-ups can occur and how community organizations can support that activation. Well, let's go to the next slide. Here, we're just trying to figure out what do we really mean by pop-up and what might make this space successful. What is the kit of parts, if you will, to kind of make these spaces activated and successful? So one, I think, overall, we might need to really consider some accessible or hard surface, some landscaping, some shade. It's hard to think about now, but it does really get hot out there in the summer. We always find it's really important when thinking about these placemaking activating sites is to think about storage sheds and where you might be able to store things like games or seating or foldable tables, those kinds of things overnight. It's really important to think through that piece. And then also if there's opportunities to include electricity and water hookups. I'd also like to just note here that there is no current formal process for setting up these kinds of things alongside the Greenway. And so it really is our job throughout this process to try to formalize that process. You know, when and where is it allowed? Who do you need to contact if you're interested in setting up one of these things along the Greenway? Is it on private or public land? All of those questions kind of matter. You know, how can the city make this process easier, hopefully? And then also, like, what is the role of the Joe Louis Greenway Partnership in all of this? And I'm going to pass it to Leona Medley right now to talk through a couple slides she has to think about these activated spaces and programming along the Greenway.
Thank you, Ashley. If you can go to the next slide. So I'm really happy to be here to just kind of introduce the partnership to the residents, those who I haven't had a chance to meet. I've been in this role for about 8 months now and have really tried to spend a lot of my time out in the community and at these meetings, really introducing the partnership. A newly formed nonprofit launched in 2022. I'm really here to support the Greenway's long-term stewardship. We're fundraising for an endowment so that we can continue to support the activation and programming of the Greenway, as well as the ongoing beautification. And so one of the really strong focuses for us is the slide that you see here. We're really focused on community engagement, activations and programming, Greenway education, volunteers and partnerships, neighborhood development, and Greenway enhancement. And just to talk really quickly a little bit about a couple of those, we think volunteers and ambassadors are really important to the sustainability of the Greenway. We want to ensure that it's a space that really has resident buy-in and resident leadership really out there on a daily basis, stewarding how the Greenway is used, maintained. We really think that ambassadors will be there to supplement and engage with folks, provide education about the neighborhood, direction to other community amenities, and really build that connectivity that we want to see on the JLG. And then when we think about neighborhood development, it really defines our mission to support sustainable development in the neighborhoods that are adjacent to the JLG. And so we're here as a partner and advocate for inclusive development that is equitable, to really advocate for policies and practices that encourage small businesses from the residents in the communities along the JLG. And so as we continue to build out our strategy and our plan, we're here to be a partner to support in those efforts. And then finally, when we really think about activating and programming, again, that's really rooted in community engagement. Next slide. So as we've spent some time over the last few months out in the neighborhood, really trying to collect information, and as we continue to do that, that really is a foundation of our organization, is thinking about how do we activate it. And so as we have, taken feedback, here are some developing ideas that we're looking to flush out as the Greenway is under construction and the segments continue to come online. So this just gives you an idea of the types of things we're thinking about. But again, it's also a place for respite, for leisure. And so as we, get used to this Greenway in our community, we want to be able to grow with the residents and make sure that we're taking feedback about how that space is used. So we are here to be a partner to the community. We have been out and done walks with different community groups and really wanted to vision how this project can benefit deeper into the neighborhoods. And so we're a partner here to do that. Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, Fiona.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have one more. So this slide is really talking about opportunities. When we talk about opportunities to be vendors, that's really critical. If you look at greenways around the country, one of the ways in which they can be an economic catalyst is really spurring on small business and entrepreneurship. So while I'm not with the city of Detroit, I would like to share this information about these different sessions. If you can see here on this flyer, the 1st, the 8th, and the 22nd, to get information about becoming a vendor. So if you want to learn about opportunities to vend in any park that is in activation across the city, this is a great place to start. And then as we start to program the Greenway, you'll be able to really plug in, because we're going to partner with the city of Detroit to continue to do that on the JLG. So we wanted to make sure we brought that information and resources here to the community and to the public so it can continue to be shared and we can make sure that people are tooled and skilled and ready to participate. Now back to you.
Great. Okay. So far we've talked about connecting better to commercial corridors and vice versa, connecting to the Greenway, supports for small business. And the last piece here is really thinking about that entrepreneurial piece. And we had another market study done from the industrial side, really thinking about how we can start to grow some entrepreneurs in Detroit and what it might mean to set up shop along the Greenway. That's a little bit different than setting up a pop-up or food trucks or those kind of smaller micro pop-ups. But, you know, what would a new retail space look like on the Greenway, and how can we support local manufacturers or small scale manufacturers? So here we're looking at the Northwest. The example area here is an on a red area. That's actually a light industrial area. If you go to the next slide, it's right off Livernois. We think that there's an opportunity there. There's some publicly owned land right alongside the Greenway that's going to be left over after the Greenway is constructed. And here there's kind of an interesting opportunity to really think about a commercial mixed space, so half commercial, half industrial, where we can really explore some long-term opportunities to create spaces for entrepreneurs. And this is an example from a company out of Atlanta that really thinks about what it means to be a modern entrepreneur. And that means that you need to really think about both warehousing and space to accept customers or to sell your goods. So it's kind of a new, I'll call it real estate product, but really, you know, how can we start to think about piloting this along the Greenway, and what kinds of businesses might be interested in setting up shop here? So it's a little bit industry, it's a little bit commercial, but it's something that would be new to Detroit, and our market analysts think that that might be an opportunity to explore at this part of the Greenway. So those are all of the big ideas that we're thinking about. I wanted to make a little bit of space to have general questions before we jump into breakout rooms to talk about some of those questions. You can either raise your hand. It's kind of, I have a different screen than you, but there's a screenshot here. You have to click on the reactions piece, and you can click the raise hands button and someone can unmute you, or you can leave your question in the chat if you want the team to answer them. Really quiet group tonight. Any questions for the team?
While we're waiting, I know there was one question in the chat about highlighting cultural assets or spaces, historical spaces, specifically Joe's homes in Detroit. And I think that's a really good point to lift up. And any of these spaces, we'd love to know where they are, map them. And while if they, you know, they may be outside of our planning area, they may be beyond places, you know, could be a mile, 2 miles from the Greenway, but in any case, it's a great opportunity for signage, especially for people who may be traversing the Greenway by bike, or in a way that they could go from there to some of these destinations. So definitely that is something to share with this team. And then at those neighborhood meetings that we host April through June, we'd love to hear more about specific spaces. All right, so we do have a couple hands up.
And Michelle, apologies for interrupting. We also have another question from Michelle in the chat about, will there be grant monies available to assist entrepreneurs in developing businesses along the Greenway?
So I would welcome any of my colleagues as well to jump in, or because we are working closely with the DEGC, the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, to think about what it means along the Greenway specifically, and how we can learn from programs that have already been running in the city. So you have things like Motor City Match and Restore, as well as a lot of technical assistance and other programs that are running through organizations throughout the city. And so we really do feel like an outcome of this plan will be to highlight priorities for those, and also ways that we might modify those or make recommendations to tailor them to the needs of the Greenway. So while we can't commit to any funds now, part of the planning process is to identify the needs for those plans so that we can recommend and help shape program recommendations in the future. All right, and now I think the first question with hand raised is trying to ask you to unmute. Miss Betty Varner, is that working? Okay, I'm gonna give that a minute. Go to Eugene, see if that works. Or I guess we could, if you're able to put your question in the chat, if for some reason it's not letting you unmute.
Hello.
Oh, there you go. Great.
Hi, can I be heard?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome.
Hi. Good evening to all. My name is Betty. I'm president of the Soda Ellsworth Black Association, and I'm struggling. I want to be excited about this Greenway, and I've been told verbally that it's going to benefit my area, but I don't understand how. And we are going to have a project that I have been advocating for years on our Finkel corridor. And I'm in the area of Finkel in Illinois, not far from Linden. So I guess maybe when we go to the breakout room, someone can really speak and say how this is going to affect my area and community and benefit what we are doing as an organization.
Yes, absolutely. And I can jump in a little bit first. Knowing the work that's going on Finkel, as well as some of our engagement in what we're calling the Northwest planning area for the Joe Louis Greenway, that's the area that Ashley zoomed into, where you have immediately along the Greenway a concentration of industrially zoned properties, some of them active, some of them former industrial. And so I think that's one way. I'd encourage you to also join the industry and jobs presentation next week. And I'll also just highlight that we will get into neighborhood specific conversations where we'll have an in-person meeting hosted where we can talk about specific corridors and sites later in the process. But some things that could impact anywhere along the Greenway, especially in areas like Ashley mentioned with the industrial, is trying to understand how to transition those industrial spaces to maybe serve commercial needs, as well as allow for connection to the Greenway itself, which ideally would help to build density and activity and bring more amenity to your community. But what we really do want to hear is also what the needs are and what you would like to see as a result of the project, so that we can try to identify those specific opportunities.
Are your people going to continue to be going to neighborhood meetings? Because I would love to invite you to one of our meetings. We don't meet in January and February. We start meeting again in March. We meet March through December, so that you can talk to and explain to us, the residents in this area, actually what is going on, please.
Absolutely, we would love to. Feel free to reach out through any of these channels or through the Joe Louis Greenway email, and also Joseph and I can put our direct contact in the chat. We'd be happy to come to any neighborhood meetings. Thank you. And I'll try to allow Eugene to unmute, and then we do want to move into those breakout rooms.
Eugene, you can unmute yourself. Okay, so I'm going to open the breakout rooms. Hopefully, Eugene, I can get his questions answered within the breakout room. And we are putting our information in the chat. So if you have any questions or concerns that you would like to reach out to us about, there's our email in the chat, and you can always reach out to us at joelouisgreenway@detroitmi.gov for anything as well. I'm now going to open the breakout room so that we may begin with our breakout discussions. We trickle back in. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully we had some great discussion. Hopefully you all were able to get some questions answered or voice some concerns, and also get contact information for people that you would like to follow up with. So I want to thank you all again for being here with us this evening, taking time out of your busy schedule to provide feedback on something that is very important, that is, that will affect the community. So we're happy to have you here in this space of providing that feedback. And so this is the meeting one of meeting five meeting virtual series. We do have a mobility discussion coming up on the 30th, industry and jobs on February 1st, housing on February 6th, and vacant land on February 8th. And you can stay tuned and register for these meetings at detroit.mi.gov/JLG planning. You can also find out more information about the planning study at that same website as well. If you are an avid user of social media, you can follow us on Instagram at JLewisGreenway and on Facebook at Joe Lewis Greenway, where we post all of our upcoming meeting information. And you can also drop down in the comments on either one of those social medias to get questions answered as well. So I did want to leave you with that. We also have a Joe Lewis Greenway email, joelewisgreenway at detroitmi.gov that you can reach out to. One of our residents asked a question about having us come and talk to your community group. We're always open to come and provide information and hear feedback and ideas from community. So if you are one of those people in a community group that would love this information, please reach out to us. Thank you again for being here, and that is it for our meeting this evening. You all have a great evening. Thank you.